Hello and welcome to the readings from Agastya Valipadu, the sacred discourses given by Sage Agastya. The last few weeks, we talked about why meditation, the importance of meditation, what are energy fields, what are the chakras or the energy centers in the body. And today, we will talk about the Kundalini Ascension. And Kundalini is a very, very popular topic for everybody in this world, right? In this period. You look at anybody and everybody wants to talk about Kundalini. Everybody wants to raise Kundalini. But today we will talk about what Appa is saying about Kundalini. So he says, to a question on what happens when Kundalini ascends, Sage Agastya explained, shooting energy always ascends upwards. So now what is the shooting energy? So we are talking about Kundalini, which is powerful energy that is coiled at the base of the spine of all humans who are manifested in this world. It doesn't matter whether you're bad, you're good, as long as you're alive and in this world, then that particular energy is coiled at the base of your spine. So in another way of understanding Kundalini is also understanding it as consciousness itself. And it is still in a dormant state. So then Appa says that Kundalini, when we meditate and as we progress on a spiritual path, all of us are aiming at allowing that Kundalini to raise from the bottom of the spine where it is in a coiled or dormant state through the different energy centers and reach Sahasrara. And what is the reason we want to do this? It is because that energy has the power to awaken supreme consciousness in the highest level of the manifested human being. So that is the whole purpose of walking on the spiritual path, to go from ignorance to knowing, to go from not being aware of the self as the supreme consciousness, knowing it only as the ego or the you or the me or whoever is around us, to knowing that we are all part of that great divine, which is the collective supreme consciousness. So the whole idea is to awaken our consciousness to that level. And as we progress through the different chakras, as Appa talked about last week, Kundalini starts giving us awakening of certain levels of consciousness, which allows us to manifest different things in our life. Like, for example, as we pass the Anahata chakra, we start becoming more and more creative in our thinking. We begin to start, writing poetry, able to explain things that most people who are in the very normal, ordinary human consciousness cannot understand or explain. So all this basically talks again about consciousness or energy levels. Okay. So what does Appa continues to say? This energy, and this is shooting energy that goes from the base of the spine to all the way to the Sahasrara, and it is through the channel we talked about, that is the Sushumna, which is right in the corresponding to the spinal area of the human body. Okay, this energy passes through the Sushumna channel and reaches the Sahasrara chakra, and that is the whole idea of all our spiritual practices. The heat is felt as a throbbing sensation. So people feel different things as the different chakras are activated, as the Kundalini rises. So many people talk about, I feel heat coming up, I feel a throbbing sensation. So these are all part of Kundalini ascension and the symptoms of Kundalini ascension. So Appa says, to control this, so this throbbing sensation, this heat, it should be actually controlled because it shows imbalance. So Appa says, to control this, close your right nostril, breathe in through the left nostril. This is the moon nadi and it cools you. So we talked about the Ida and Pingala nadis, the two nadis or energy conduits which are kind of intertwining and going up from the base of the human body to the up to the ajna and then keep going up. So in the left side is actually the cooling nadi. So that is why whoever is practicing or doing advanced practices of meditation must do the Nadi Shodhana Pranayama, which, a lot of people, if you can look on YouTube, a lot of people have explained where you close one nostril, breathe into the other, close the other nostril, breathe into this one, and it actually balances the energy. But when energy is more, what do you call it, potent in a particular area, then it becomes more, it causes heat and the throbbing sensation. And Appa says to control that, breathe into the left nostril, which is the moon nadi, and it will cool you down. Then he continues to say, when the Rudra Gantri is not open yet, you feel like you're passing through a locked gate. You cannot pass beyond it. At that time, pray to Shiva. Whenever you sit in prayer on Shakti, invoke Shiva, he'll balance the power. Now, what is Shiva and Shakti? Look at Shiva and Shakti as the creative principles, the male and female energy. So you don't have to be a Hindu. It doesn't matter what religion you are. Think of these Shiva and Shakti as male and female principles because it applies to every human being, no matter what religion, what area, what path you follow. So everything that we are talking about now applies to all of us. So Appa says, we also talked about the granthis last time, which is we talked about the three main granthis. One is the Mooladhara, which is the Brahma Granthi. Then we talked about the Vishnu Granthi, which is in the Anahata Chakra area. And then the Rudra Granthi, which is in the Ajna Chakra area. So Appa says, when you come towards the Ajna Chakra, for very advanced practitioners, you will feel like you're pushing against something that is closed. And at that time, pray to Shiva or pray to that cooling principle. So think of the heat and cool principles and pray to Shiva or that energy that can help you balance the power of the Shakti, because Shakti is the creative force, very, very powerful. And Shiva is more the calming factor. It'll balance you. So that is what happens as you move up to the Rudra Granthi. Then he says, the ascent of Kundalini should always be smooth and painless. The headache on top of the head, throbbing in the spine are all indications there are some imbalances. All chakras should be clean and be working properly. If you're imbalanced, it affects the smooth ascent of Kundalini energy. So that is why we keep talking over and over again about how important it is to do the right things, to maintain your body well, to think right, to act right, to speak right, and to eat right. So everything which Buddha talks about, what Christ talks about, everything comes back to the same thing, which is put your foundation, make your foundation strong. And what is that foundation? Living as per Dharma. Because think of everything that you do as creating energy. So always maintain your actions, your thoughts, your eating, whatever you do, to produce only positive energy. So Appa says, as we talked about last time, if there is imbalance, if there is dirt in any of these energy centers, the chakras, then it is the rising Kundalini energy will create negative effects. The Kundalini just comes. It doesn't matter whether you're a good person or a bad person, and that is actually true. People can, with certain yogic practices, force Kundalini to rise up. But what happens if there is some bad or mala in that area? Then it causes a lot of detrimental things to happen to you. It's actually very bad. So that is why for someone who's practicing Kundalini, dharma or righteous life, purity in thought, action, and deed is paramount of high importance. Then Appa continues. So it is important that you should not attempt Kundalini practice when your body is weak, your mind is agitated, or the chakras are not working properly. Again, what is he saying? Don't do it when you're sick, when you're diseased, when you're having problems of the body. Don't do it. When your mind is agitated, don't attempt it. This has to be practiced only when somebody is completely calm. However, what is happening around the world? There are a lot of practitioners who talk about how the Kundalini has flowered, how they can make somebody else awaken their Kundalini, how it can flow. This is what happens. And all that is not correct. Unless you're completely, following a pure life, trying to do any of this your higher advanced yogic practices is going to be bad for you. Even to that stage where one ascends, as Appa said last time, all the way to Sahasrara. And there, when there is impurity, that person becomes like Ashwatthama, completely lost in life. So let us be careful about that. Then Appa says, when Kundalini flowers upwards, it does not produce sensations. This is especially so if it has crossed the Vishnu Granthi. So if people say, oh, I have a throbbing headache, I have this happening, I have that happening, Kundalini does not produce anything, any sensation once it passes the Vishnu Granthi, the Anahata Chakra. After that, the ascension is very smooth. This is the words directly coming from sage Agastya. I have seen and heard a lot of YouTube channels about Kundalini, and please know these are words of Agastya that we are reading, which are actually true. And I'll continue to explain this a little more as we go forward. Then he says about Kundalini flowering, he says, when Kundalini has fully flowered, it is a different state. It will bring forth great powers that are much higher than that of an ordinary man. What do you understand by this? Then he said, for certain people, the change is not complete, even though they feel that the Kundalini is flowering. If it has flowered, they would not be able to live an ordinary life in this world. That is why it provokes emotions, it provokes feelings as it ascends, but it will not completely flower for someone who is still living an ordinary life in this created world. Because when Kundalini completely flowers, that state is totally different. Not only is it about the powers, it's about being totally oblivious to the ego or the manifested self, which means the person will no longer be able to even eat, because they're thinking, because the idea of the self, of feeding this body, everything goes away. And in such a stage, for them, nothing is wrong, nothing is right. They cannot see the difference between right and wrong because they have already transcended beyond duality. So if anybody says, oh, my Kundalini is flowered, they're still talking to you, it hasn't flowered. If they're still talking to you, it hasn't flowered. It is not possible. Full flowering of Kundalini is absence of the self, complete divorce from ego. Ego is completely taken away. When I talk about ego, what am I talking about? I'm talking about the I consciousness. There is no longer a feeling of I. So what then is an indication of someone arriving at that stage? It's bliss. Not the throbbing sensations, not the headaches, not any of those sensations. It is bliss. And you know how this bliss is felt. And Appa has given me an indication of this when I was meditating a lot during a certain period of my time, where the bliss would just bubble up from inside. It is indescribable. It comes out. It just bubbles up like a fountain, and it's waves and waves of bliss that keeps coming out. And when that happens, your whole body changes. You start glowing. Look around you. If somebody says that if Kundalini is flowered and there is no glow, if there is the joy is not seen on their face, then the Kundalini hasn't flowered. But that doesn't mean they haven't ascended a certain level. They have. They have ascended a certain level. They have understood a lot of things. They've probably gone past Ajna, but only there. But they haven't arrived at complete flowering of Kundalini yet. Now, how do we understand all this? Let us go back to something that I have explained in the book Agastya Yoga Siddhanta. So let's look at it like this. The levels of consciousness that we are ascending through Kundalini, think of it as levels of consciousness in the human body. So let us begin with the Muladhara Chakra. Think of the Muladhara Chakra as the consciousness of kind of becoming aware of it as being separate from the absolute or the supreme consciousness. Then as you ascend to the Swadhisthana Chakra, where you have the male and female principles, and remember this, everything that is happening within the human body is happening in the cosmic level. So the kingdom of God is within you. And this is what it means. So the Swadhisthana is where the female and male principles are present in the human body. And the coming together of these two is the idea of creation beginning to take place. Then we come to the Manipura Chakra, which is the element of fire. So we have talked about Muladhara as the earth, the ego becoming consciousness as something separate from the absolute. Swadhisthana is the water element. We talked about the 5 premier elements in the last few sessions. The water is in Swadhisthana, so it's the male and female elements coming forward to create something. The Manipura is the fire element, which is in the navel area, and that is creation taking place. See, when we talk about creation in many religions and many spiritual contexts, they talk about creation as coming from fire, and that is what it is. Creation coming through fire. Muladhara Chakra is the fire, and the Manipura Chakra is the fire. Then we come to the Anahata Chakra, which is the air principle. Here, the created ego manifests as the universe. So this is the manifested universe. So we come from the ego becoming separate or understanding its separate identity from the absolute, the male and female principles coming together, the creation actually happening, and then the manifested world as we see in the Anahata Chakra. Then we go to the Vishuddha Chakra, which is then the upward ascension of the manifested ego, understanding that it is not just the created human body or the ego, it is something more to it. That is where we are all there. And that is the Vishuddha Chakra, or the creation understanding a higher purpose of its own, or the ego understanding its higher purpose. Then we go up to the Ajna Chakra, where wisdom dawns, because Ajna Chakra, as Appa said, is beyond all the 5 elements, and that is where wisdom dawns. And when one reaches the Ajna Chakra, that is when they start understanding everything about the world, the created world, the higher consciousness, and they're able to explain, they're able to speak. So many of the gurus that we talk about today are already at that level and understand another thing there, which is anybody who's following a guru, the guru can take you all the way up to the Ajna Chakra. There the guru's duty ends. From there, the soul, or you, which is a separated entity from the absolute, has to ascend on your own. There is no guru who can take you up from the Ajna Chakra. It is impossible. Because between the Ajna Chakra and the Sahasrara Chakra, there is something called the Soma Chakra. And, I do know a certain thing called the Agnihotra principle, or Agnihotra ritual that we do in the physical world. There is an Agnihotra ritual that is happening at that stage. And at that stage, only the grace of Divine Mother or the creative principle can take you higher. That is where we talk about the Sri Vidya principles. What people are trying to do in a physical world through different mantras and all that takes place in there. But there, Divine Mother herself comes to give you that final release. Because think about it. You're a manifested ego, separate from the absolute. And that permission to let go of this created world, to let go of everything that you know as true, has to come from that energy which can give you the final cut or release. Once that happens, you are no longer present in this world. You're gone because you have become one with the absolute. So that is why you will not find a lot of written text or explanations about what happens between the Ajna Chakra and the Sahasrara Chakra. There are no words that can bring these concepts to the world. There are no techniques for that. So if anybody is telling you, yes, I can take you all the way to Sahasrara Chakra, it's not possible. I am telling this to you through Appa's grace. That final ascension happens within you by yourself as the soul that has reached a state of super consciousness is able to go to the supreme consciousness. That final journey is yours alone. Even in the path of the Siddha, the Guru can take you all the way up to the 15th stage, 16th, 17th, and 18th stage. You climb yourself. So understand these basic things, but also understand if you're following the path of Jnana Yoga, you do not have to do any of these things. You do not have to practice anything. You do not have to do these techniques or anything like that. All that happens within you naturally. So do not force any of these things. Let them happen naturally, because your soul knows what you need. And when the time comes, it will all happen. There is no other way. Every one of us, the moment we are created or we manifest ourselves as the human ego, we are already on a journey back to the supreme consciousness, whether we know it or not. Some people take millions of lifetimes. The others, like us who are already aware, are taking deliberate steps, which brings us back to one more thing, back to dharma or righteousness. If you do not have the foundation of righteousness, none of these things can happen. And if it happens, as we know, then you end up in eternal damnation, and that is pure hell. The worst of the lokas that we Indians talk about, the patala, the worst loka or level of consciousness. So always remember, everybody can talk about Kundalini, everybody can talk about chakras, but if you haven't understood the basic of life, if you cannot live a righteous life, if you still have anger, greed, and passion, any of these things in yourself, then try to get rid of it. Try to start walking on the righteous path, because without that, none of these things can happen. So with this thought, I'll leave you today, and we will come back and talk about the centers of higher knowledge and other explanations that Appa has given us on the path of Kundalini. So